We've got the technological revolution, and now it's time for a business revolution. Technology with a purpose that changes the way work is getting done.
Welcome to a brand new episode of our podcast, Human and AI, Mind, Machines and the Great in Ascent. I'm Oli.
And I'm Abri. And today we have a very special episode lined up.
We're diving deep into the economics of AI with a truly inspiring person who can actually explain why your company bought all the flashy AI technologies, but your productivity chart still looks like, I would say, underwhelming. Aubrey, you did fly across the globe to record this conversation. How did it go?
Uli, I did. I actually flew all the way to Silicon Valley to meet with Professor Erik Brynjolfsson from the Stanford Digital Economy Lab, and it was quite an experience.
I guess most folks know about Erik's famous productivity J-curve, right? Which basically frames the notion on when you adopt a transformative technology such as AI, productivity will first fall before it rises again. So that means companies are investing heavily in reorganizing, training, upskilling, all that shows up as cost before it actually shows up as the gains. It's a bit of like, I guess, going to the gym, is it?
Yeah, Uli, that's actually a pretty good analogy because literally in sports science, there's that concept of supercompensation. So whenever there's a training impulse, for instance, you're lifting weights, you actually initially tear muscle fibers, you create like little micro injuries and your performance will initially dip. And only once it recovers and new muscle strength grows, you get stronger and your performance increases.
Cool.
And that's the same analogies to the productivity J-curve, right?
That brings a bit of, the difference between lag and the, I guess, speed of, adopting technologies.
Exactly. And what we are actually seeing also these days, recording this intro is like just recently Anthropic released their new product, Claude Cowork, and they claim to have built in 10 days using Claude Code. And I think that's such a perfect example of like those productivity games really coming and AI really augmenting us people and allowing us to do things that were not possible, unthinkable years ago.
Vibe coding, guys. So that's out there. What I think what's interesting is from Erik's work is actually also he refers to AIs making the spiky skills matter more. That's interesting. So you don't need to be good at everything, but you need to be just exceptional at something unique. So your creativity, your domain expertise, or your ability to contextualize, so connecting dots, and let then AI handle the rest. Isn't it interesting?
Yeah, it indeed is. And that's also something we'll touch upon in the conversation a little later. So Erik actually even talks about a premium on creativity. And that's something that is uniquely human as machines are getting better and better at just executing.
All right, Aubrey. I think, let's dive right into your conversation with Erik. For everyone listening, whether you're implementing an AI in your team, shaping strategies at executive level, or just trying to figure out if that AI tool is actually being helping or just creating more work, I think you will love this conversation because it brings all the insights that you can use tomorrow. Let's hand the button over and listen to the recorded conversation with Aubrey and Professor Erik Brynjolfsson.
It's my honor and a real privilege to welcome to our stage one of the world's leading thinkers on the economics of technology and especially artificial intelligence. And I'm talking, of course, about none other than Professor Erik Brynjolfsson. So great to have you with us today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
And for those of you who don't know him yet, he's the Jerry Yang and Akiko Yamazaki Professor and Senior Fellow at the Stanford Institute for Human-Centered AI and Director of the Stanford Digital Economy Lab. Erik's research has fundamentally shaped how organizations worldwide approach digital transformation. His groundbreaking research on the productivity J-curve and the economics of AI have influenced how organizations are shaping their future. Most recently, his studies on generative AI have revealed fascinating insights into how these technologies are shaping work and productivity for people at every experience level. Professor Brynjolfsson, welcome. We're eager to explore how leadership must evolve in the age of AI, particularly as we accelerate our one tech company transformation. And let's jump right in. For those in the audience who may not really be familiar with your work, can you maybe briefly explain the focus of your research and maybe some of the earlier insights in the context of data and AI and how they have found their way to the public through your books and papers?
Sure. Well, I've been working on AI for a long time. As a child, I was interested in artificial intelligence. And in college, I worked on some projects with AI. After college, I started a company called Foundation Technologies in homage to Isaac Asimov that built expert systems. These are rule-based systems. I taught a course at Harvard Extension School on building expert systems and applications of artificial intelligence with my colleague Todd Lufborough. So it's been a big interest of mine for a long time. And I've always been thinking about how does this change the economy? What does this mean for productivity, growth, and even human well-being? And of course, the technology has evolved and the impact has evolved. There's never been a time like today. In 2025, I think technology has been growing faster than it ever has been before. It's been improving on all sorts of different dimensions, and we're beginning to see some very significant effects on the economy.
And that's for sure. It's in rapid speed, like with the Formula One field sometimes.
That's right.
So at Siemens, we're also deeply concerned or immersed in combining the real and digital worlds. That's something like at the core of our DNA. And we're also convinced that data and AI is central to this. And we've seen countless technological shifts, but many argue that AI stands apart due to its really profound impact. So are leaders now required to fundamentally rethink their approach to strategy, risk, decision-making, and even how they use their own capabilities?
It is a time when leaders really have to think what they're doing. Earlier waves of technology mostly augmented our muscles. Siemens was a pioneer, of course, in the electrification of the world. Now we have what Andy McAfee and I call the second machine age, which is augmenting our minds. And I think this is going to be even bigger. These are all general purpose technologies, but I think AI is the most general, the most impactful of all general purpose technologies. If we can reinvent intelligence and have machines that augment our brains, then we can reinvent almost every other field. We can boost our economy, the environment, health and well-being. All of these will be turbocharged by better intelligence.
So you already touched upon the general purpose technologies and that AI is very special in that context.
Mm-hmm.
Given the scale and complexity, what are some of the most common pitfalls that leaders must really avoid when guiding their organizations through these profound transformation processes?
Well, the first thing is exactly what you said, that there's a leadership imperative to think about this as a transformation, not simply an implementation. So too often people look at the existing organization and they think, oh, here's a task where a machine could plug in. And you can certainly get some value from that, but the real value comes from that complete reinvention. Let me give you a concrete example of a technology that's already played out a little bit so we understand it better. When the internet was introduced in the 1990s, people like Jeff Bezos said, oh, we can reinvent bookstores. We can use this technology. Now, the simple way would have been to go into a bookstore and say, oh, there's a cashier. We can replace the cashier and put a robot or an automatic cashier where that person is. And in some ways, that might have helped productivity a little, but you can see that wouldn't be a fundamental transformation of retailing. Instead, they rethought everything. They created a browser-based interface, and they had inventory stored in central warehouses, and they had shipping, etc. This complete reinvention of the value chain is where most of the value comes from. And that's happened time and time again. It happened with electricity, and Siemens was a pioneer with that. It happened with the internal combustion engine. And today, leaders have an imperative to think about how they can reinvent organizations. General purpose technologies require complementary changes in business processes, in products and services, in worker training. All of these need to be reconceived. And that's the real job of managers today, not simply to buy the technology to replace one part or another part of their existing organization.
And I totally agree with that, because it's not just about the technology, it's really about organizations and about changing the fabric of what organizations are made of and how they operate.
Right.
So what would you say are like one of the most fundamental drivers that leaders can take advantage of to really change that fabric?
Well, it starts with culture, and you have to have a system where you think about how can we integrate the people directly into how they're using the technology. And that means using the technology to augment what they're doing, not simply replace it. And there are new ways of using the technology that allow workers to do new things they never could have done before. The other thing is if you can bring the workers into the decision-making process, they often will identify opportunities as well. So this combination of having the people that you're working with use the technology in new ways, as well as augmenting what they're already doing, leads to a lot more value.
And that also means to really be inclusive and take them along that journey of change. So
exactly. There's a lot of justified concern that technology can eliminate jobs. And I have a harsh truth that technology has always been eliminating jobs. It's always been creating jobs. And you have to embrace that dynamism. No company, no country, no individual has ever succeeded by trying to freeze in place what they're doing and never change. The safer thing is actually to embrace the change. It may seem frightening at first, but the reality is if that you embrace that dynamism, then you're going to be able to be flexible enough to use the technology in new ways, and ultimately more likely to survive the ups and downs of the disruption.
No, certainly. But it's challenging. It's not easy with all the uncertainty.
That's right. Of course it's challenging. And, that's the nature of life. That's the nature of businesses. And, a lot of big companies haven't survived those ups and downs. Siemens has been around for 150? No, more than that.
Almost 178.
178 years. So that's gone through a lot of ups and downs, depressions, wars, technological changes, reinvention. And it's a testament to the flexibility and the dynamism of the company. And you want to try to retain that kind of resilience. Not all companies have been able to manage those kinds of transitions, but we're having even bigger ones up ahead. So let's buckle up and be prepared.
Hell yeah.
That's right.
No, but so you're also maybe encouraging the Siemens people here that maybe we've done it in the past, and maybe that's a great testament that we can also do it in the future.
Yeah. Let's go back to the roots of, Werner von Siemens, when they implemented some of the first electricity, at the World's Fair and elsewhere. It was an amazing demonstration, but the real value came years later when they built an entire system with a power station with overhead wires and just reconceived the way work was being done. That transformation may take years and requires a lot of co-invention, but just as with my example of the internet retailing and my examples of AI today, it's that broader transformation that adds the value, not the piece-by-piece implementation.
Those complementary innovations as well.
Complementary innovations. And many of those complementary innovations, by the way, some of them are technological, new pieces of equipment, but the most important ones are actually business processes and human capital. Economists call it human capital. Most other people call it training or education, but it's allowing workers to do new things. And human capital, business process change, organizational capital, they're often intangible, so they don't tend to get measured very well. And some people, when you can't measure it, they ignore them and they don't think they're real, but they are very real. Yeah. They're just not something that we can touch. They're intangible. Those are things that managers, forward-looking managers, need to think about. If you want to be a good leader, you have to embrace the culture, the process, the human capital, not just the tangible equipment.
I guess one step to embracing AI is also to lead by example, right?
Yes.
So how could leaders encourage more imaginative uses of AI, moving beyond automating what already exists to enabling creative and totally new possibilities for their people?
Well, it starts with using the technology ourselves. So we leaders need to be able to understand how it's used in our daily work. And each of us, I think, are going to become CEOs in our own way, not just of humans, but of a whole fleet of agents that are doing more and more things. For instance, in software engineering, what we're seeing is that senior managers that had been delegating work to the junior programmers are now also delegating work to AI agents, and they're having the junior programmers and the AI agents work together. So in turn, those junior programmers have their own AI agents, and they're the CEOs of their own little fleet of people. But that kind of integration of humans and machines together is part of that reimagining of how work gets done. It can be difficult to identify the opportunities for doing that. But one tool that we found very helpful is what we call the task-based approach, where we take an organization and we break it down to its processes, into the occupations, the jobs that are being done. And each job, if you go down, you can break a job into individual tasks. We call those the atomic unit of work. And then in turn, each of those tasks, you can evaluate whether or not an LLM or other tool can help with it. So if one of the tasks is writing a memo, certainly an LLM can help with that. If one of the tasks is lifting a box, well, an LLM can't do that. Maybe some other technology can help with that. And as you go through each of the tasks, you start getting a roadmap of where AI can help and where the biggest value added is. And then you have a data-driven approach to reinventing work.
That's certainly a good starting point to like really break it down, and also like the notion of like those atomic pieces.
That's right. The task is the atomic unit of work. And so in papers I wrote in 2017 with Tom Mitchell, we wrote a paper about what machine learning can do. Later, Daniel Rock and a team from OpenAI wrote a paper called GPTs that looked at 18,000 different tasks. And now more and more people are embracing this approach. My company, WorkHelix, has an automated way of doing this. And if you do that, then you finally step back and have like a bird's eye view of your entire organization, all the tasks that are being done. And AI can help with some of them, not so much with others. And most importantly, can help you reinvent the way that they fit together.
How has the way that you are operating, that you're working, changed now over the past few years?
My personal work, it's completely different. I have conversations with LLMs every day, and I test different research ideas. Sometimes I now have conversations with voice because they're these great tools. I have to be clear that sometimes the LLMs are wrong, and I have to be able to push back and say, wait a minute, that's not actually correct. The other day, an LLM, I asked for a reference for a particular piece of research, and it gave me a paper written by Erik Brynjolfsson.
Oh.
And I was like, wait a minute, no, Erik Brynjolfsson never wrote, I'd like to write that paper. I'm hoping to write that paper, but I haven't written it yet. And so I pushed back, and the LLM kind of sheepishly said, well, that's the kind of paper that would have been written. I said, yes, I wasn't asking for the kind of paper. I was asking for the real paper. So you have to know enough about the field to be able to have that intelligent conversation. But the great thing is that I've, in my own work, it goes out and gets the data, gets the answers to some of the questions. I can test different hypotheses. All of this can be done 10 or 100 times faster than I could if I was working with my grad students or on my own and searching the internet. So it's definitely changing the way research is being done. But again, in my field, and I think almost every field, it's important to keep humans in the loop because the machines are far from flawless. They can be aids to help me see new things, but at the end of the day, a human has to be responsible for the answers.
And this is now very interesting, right? So suddenly we're working together with a system that can maybe also make mistakes, but sound very convincing in doing so. And
they're designed to be plausible. I mean, basically, they're trained to give a likely, plausible kind of answer. But plausible doesn't always mean true, does it?
No, it doesn't. But what does that mean now for our leaders? So now we have these systems. We might all become CEOs of armies of AI agents.
That's right. You got it.
But so what is that vision that you have?
Well, CEOs, what is the job of a CEO? I mean, so there's different parts of getting anything done. You have to conceive of the right question to pursue. You have to execute it. You have to verify it. CEOs are especially important to do that first and the third. Their job is to set the vision, ask the right question, not just prompt engineering, but really fundamentally, what is it that's important for us to try to solve? Then the machine can often help with a lot of the execution, but CEOs also have to verify and say, hey, is that good quality work? Is that what we're looking for? Does it meet the KPIs we're interested in? Or maybe it looked good at first, but now when we dive deeper, it's not correct. So just like a CEO managing a group of people, a CEO of agents, a CEO of AI, which is all of us, we have to be able to do all three of those steps, but especially the first and third, conceiving of the question and verifying the outputs.
So being creative, I guess, helps, or critical thinking in the end?
Absolutely. No, this is creativity. And I believe this is something that can be taught or it can be learned or it can be retained. That first step requires a lot of creativity. You have to go out. You don't just want to do the same thing. You have to think about the big questions. There's a story that Andy McAfee and I wrote about in The Second Machine Age. Pablo Picasso, the famous artist, was shown an early computer. He looked at it for a minute or two and he said, I don't think that's very interesting. All it does is it gives you answers.
That's funny.
And of course, answers is useful, I think, but the real value comes from asking the right questions. Now, all of us, I think, have the capacity to be creative and ask more of the right questions. One of the sad things, actually, is that in much of our education, we stamp that out of people. If you have children, you know that if you put a pile of blocks in front of the child on the floor, what are they going to do? The first thing they're going to do is going to start building something, right?
And then destroying it again.
And then destroying it again. Or if they have a piece of paper, they're going to draw something. They just love creating and mixing and matching and rearranging things. In school, too often, we tell them, stop doing that. Stop daydreaming. Stop imagining new things. Just sit and quietly follow instructions. Well, following instructions is what machines should be doing. We should be doing the creative part.
If we now shift that to the work context, don't you feel like it's similar? Like we're in school, there's one thing that is right or wrong. I mean, we're trying to get that out of people again, right? Like the time at school, everyone tells you there's just one right answer and you're being trained that way. And then now you go into the workforce and then there's so many innovation labs and they want you to be creative. But you also got to have that environment where you feel safe enough to dare to be creative.
You need to have the psychological safety, but you also need to embrace creativity and try new things. And the world is changing where there's more and more of a premium. As I said earlier, there are those three different parts, but that first part of conceiving of the questions is more important now than ever before because we have tools that are getting very good at executing. And the third part is also more important because, a lot of the earlier technologies, a lot of the computer systems, they were provably verifiably correct. If you type numbers into a calculator, you're going to get the right answer. But hopefully, almost always. Yeah. But an LLM is not like that. An LLM, it gives you the plausible answers. And so it's very important to go back and check, is this really sensible? Is this important? Now, the good news is that for many kinds of questions, many kinds of problems, it's a lot easier to verify it than it is to create it. So, I can ask an LLM to make a bunch of poems or songs. It would be very hard for me to write them, but I can look at them afterwards and say, hey, that's a pretty good one, or that's not such a good one. That's much easier than creating them. Same thing with a lot of reports, doing an analysis. And so it's changed around the nature of the work that we need to focus on.
So again, that augmentation piece.
Absolutely. Augmentation and verification as well as the creativity are both important.
So now we're also very curious to learn from your experience, and maybe you have some specific examples where you've seen leaders supporting their teams to engage, experiment, and build deep data and AI capabilities.
Yeah, a lot of AI has been used to just capture existing work and replicate it, and there's a lot of value in that. We're just beginning to see AI for scientific discovery, for creativity and marketing and elsewhere. LLMs will hallucinate, and mostly that's a bad thing. But also, in a way, hallucinations are creativity. They're an alternative way of answering something. And if you use them the right way, those hallucinations can give you new ideas for products, new ideas for marketing campaigns, new ideas for scientific combinations of chemicals. So there's this interesting edge there between truth and imagination that LLMs are often just on the edge of that.
That's very philosophical. But so in the work context, what can a leader do to really help their teams that they're engaged with AI and build up those capabilities? That they dare to experiment.
Well, it comes back to psychological safety again. I think that a lot of people, understandably, see AI and LLMs as a threat to their jobs.
Yeah.
And what I encounter many times when I work with companies through my organization, WorkHelix and elsewhere, is the CEO, the senior management is very excited about AI. But then when you get to middle management or some of the people in the workforce, they're more worried. They think that they might lose their jobs. And the truth is that some of them are at risk because there's going to be parts of jobs that they can change. But if you create the psychological safety, if you show them that there's new jobs that they can do, if there's new parts of their job, if the AI can augment parts of their job, then they're going to embrace it. Ultimately, you want to create a win-win process. For instance, when we helped a company roll out a large language model in a contact center, what we found was that the LLM made the workers far more productive, more output per hour, more call handle time, more resolutions. So the stockholders were happy. We're getting more productivity. Then we looked at how the customers were responding. We looked at net promoter scores. We looked at customer sentiment. That is, like, if you look at the transcript, the number of happy words and angry words. The customers were also happy.
Nice.
And then we were looking at the workers. We were a little worried that this was maybe squeezing the workers to benefit the stockholders and the customers. But that's not what we found. We found that the workers also enjoyed it better. They were happy to be able to give better answers. They were working with happier customers, which is always nicer. And employee turnover went down. So they were more likely to stick on the job. So this is a nice example of how you can create a win-win-win. All three groups were better off afterwards. And I think if the people in Siemens and around the world understand that AI can be something that makes their jobs better and helps them be better performers, help their customers be happier, then everybody shares in those gains. It doesn't have to be a zero sum, one party wins at the other party's expense. It just makes the overall pie bigger.
And who doesn't love a big pie?
That's right, we all do.
But I really love how you brought together those different perspectives, right? Because a lot of times what I hear when we talk about AI is productivity. And productivity is super important. But I love that you also brought in the customer satisfaction.
Absolutely.
And then also how do people feel about this? And
yeah, this is a really important lesson, is that it's almost always a mistake to just have a single performance metric. You need to have a dashboard with multiple KPIs, because if you get better performance on one metric at the expense of others, that's not really a win. You want to keep a balanced scorecard. And a good manager is somebody who understands that there are these different ways of measuring performance, and for the different stakeholders, and they all need to benefit if it's going to be a success.
And this way we get the win-win-win.
Exactly.
I came across a study a few months ago, beginning of the year actually, where they said that they found out that a lot of people lie about using AI because other people might perceive them as less competent or as lazy. And even there was another study among programmers, and that once people knew that someone like worked with AI, then they would also rate it with a worse rating. And I guess it also plays into your psychological safety that like, I dare to speak about this, that I'm using AI, but that this is being encouraged in my environment.
Yeah. No, I think it's a big mistake when people downgrade people just because they use AI. At the same time, I think the user has to take responsibility for it. At the end, say, this is my work. Yes, I used AI to help me, just like I might have used a calculator or a bulldozer to help me move rocks. There's nothing wrong with using a tool if you still take responsibility for the output. So I encourage my students, I encourage the workers I work with to use AI as much as possible. Be proud of it. Show how you used it. Acknowledge it. Don't hide it. But also recognize that if a mistake happens, it's the human's responsibility, not the AI's responsibility. Don't finger point. And one of the things that we're having difficulty with right now in law firms and medical areas and elsewhere is this diffusion of responsibility. And it's not clear who should take responsibility. I think best practice is always to have clear lines of authority, clear lines of responsibility, and put guardrails around so that people know that AI can go off the rails if you're not careful, and you want to set it up in such a way that you protect as much as possible from that.
So your take is that people themselves should have most accountability?
Always. There always needs to be a human that you can point to who's responsible, the manager or whoever who's responsible for that particular part. I wouldn't accept as an excuse, oh, the AI got it wrong. Yeah. You have to be responsible.
But you brought it to the table.
You brought it to the table, and God bless you for trying to use AI to help you, but still take responsibility.
And I think it's so exciting, right? Because on the one hand now we see that super agency, like suddenly humans can do way, way more than what we thought was possible years ago.
Exactly.
And at the same time, this increased agency comes with that increased accountability that you have to be aware of.
It's a more powerful tool, and that's great. It allows you to do new things. And that means you can create mistakes faster than ever, or you can create successes faster than ever. And what we find is a really competent person will find that AI makes them much more productive, but somebody who isn't careful, they can destroy value even faster than before. So it's become kind of an amplifier. We might have thought that AI would be a great leveler, but in fact, what we're seeing is kind of a power law where a few people are really using it well and getting extraordinary results, 10x or 100x performance. Then there's a long tail of a lot of people who aren't really getting the benefits. And one of the goals of a good manager, good leaders, is to level up the organization and to have more people be like those power users. At WorkHelix, we take the data from the best users and use it to help teach everyone else in the organization how to be one of those power users.
So you do it that way, like in a data-driven way?
We do it very data-driven. We look at the queries they're doing, the tasks they're using it for, and then we make it accessible to other people in the organization. And this turns out to be a lot better. Before, we would mostly just experts like me would go in and tell them what they could be using. But now we have a user within the organization that's doing it, walking the walk, and it's much more convincing and it's much more targeted to the particular needs of that company.
Like a super user.
A super user, exactly. And these, every company has people like this that embrace the technology, they're leading edge users, and they can learn a lot. That said, I also want to say there's a pitfall that people make mistake. One company we looked at, they were looking at the power of the AI tools for coding, and what they found was that the people using the AI tools were about 41% more productive than the people not using the tools. Okay. And they thought, oh, that's terrific. These tools are adding a lot of value. Yeah. But then they brought us in, and we looked a little bit more closely, and I had some bad news that those workers, they were more productive even before they used the AI tool. They were already power users.
So you need to have a
you need to
control group.
Control group, exactly. Yeah, you are scientists. So you know that there's selection bias there. So we went back and we did a more careful control. And thankfully, they were still more productive. It was only about 11%.
Okay.
So it wasn't completely useless, but it was, it wasn't nearly as much as they thought. These are the kinds of mistakes I think often happen when people are just using observational correlations as opposed to doing real causal inference. As an economist, there's been a revolution over the past 10 years or so. It's called the credibility revolution, where people are learning to take observations and turn them into causal estimates. We've all heard the saying, correlation is not causality, but sometimes it is. And if you do it right, if you use differences in differences, instrumental variables, and all their econometric techniques, you can actually tease out causality from observational data. Of course, the best is if you have a real controlled experiment. But even without that, you can often get this causal estimates. These days, you can't publish a good paper in an economics journal without that kind of careful, rigorous econometrics. And all of my students, everyone I work with does that. Sadly, most businesses aren't using these techniques as much as they should. And a mission that I have is to bring these techniques of causal inference to the business world. And then we'll really understand when AI is adding value and when it is in a causal way.
So our productivity statistics don't hallucinate themselves.
Exactly. And it's probably the most important question most managers have to know is what's really working, what's not working. Yeah. And it's not enough just to do proof of concept here and there. You need to really be a data-driven causal estimate, but it can be done.
You have mentioned that productivity J-curve earlier, and that oftentimes we also read about those like crazy productivity numbers, or at least like massive investments, and then those numbers, and then we're not like always sure, can we trust them or not?
That's right. I mean, what we're seeing is that, of course, the raw capabilities of the technology is amazing. So a lot of the benchmarks, technical benchmarks, they're doing very, very well. Even winning the math gold Olympiad.
I would love to win that.
Yeah, and not many humans can do that, but now the LLMs can. But then when you go to businesses, it's all over the place. There's a few targeted places where they've got big returns. There's a much larger set that have been, frankly, disappointed. They haven't been getting the returns that they were hoping for. And part of the reason is they're not doing the two things we talked about earlier. They're not doing the task-based analysis to identify the opportunities. They're not doing causal estimation to understand what's really adding the value. If they do those two things, then I think we're going to level up and we're going to take those amazing capabilities and translate them into business performance. It's not happening yet. My mission is to speed that up, to shorten the J-curve, to bring productivity up in businesses, and ultimately that will affect the entire economy. My belief is we're just in the early stages of that.
Okay.
We've got the technological revolution, and now it's time for a business revolution. Technology with a purpose that changes the way work is getting done. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that in the next few years, especially if they adopt these techniques that I'm talking about, the task-based analysis, causal estimates. And really, it also ultimately boils down to not just experimenting with the technology, but really thinking how it's going to change work. I mean, to give you one kind of concrete example. Recently, I was working with a company and they did this hackathon. Lots of companies love to do hackathons.
We also love hackathons.
They're fun and a lot of people learn things. But I think that you have to do more than just a hackathon. This company, the hackathon, a bunch of people used an LLM to make lunch menus more effective. And I thought, okay, well, that's kind of fun, but is that really your core business value to make better lunch menus? No, I don't think so. So I'm glad that the people learned how to use the technology, but now it's time to have the discipline of taking that capability and applying it to a real business problem. How can you make a customer more satisfied? How can you improve your supply chain? How can you have more product innovation? That's where the real value from the company comes, not from better lunch menus. So hackathons are fine, but ultimately, if you do the task-based analysis, you'll know where the value is coming from.
And so what you're saying is to really also apply it to real world business problems and not just make up problems or solve things that are not.
You've got it exactly right. And those real world business problems, they should be driving your decisions. So don't go from technology and see what it can do. Start with the business need, the business problem, and then work backwards to see how the technology can address that. And again, this is partly because we're going through a different stage of the life cycle. Early days, I think it was okay to play around with the technology, and there's nothing wrong with that. But now we're at a stage where we need to generate business value, and that means using these techniques.
So not just falling in love with technology, but a lot of people...
Not just. It's okay to fall in love with technology, but you want to do more than fall in love.
Right. But that means, if we go back to your J-curve, that we're not quite at the lowest point yet, but like still...
No, I think actually turning the corner. Well,
we're already turning. This is so interesting.
To be a little bit more nuanced, there's many J curves, and different companies are at different stages, different technologies are at different stages. But what I'm seeing is a lot of companies, especially smaller companies, are beginning to turn the curve. A lot of startups around here in Silicon Valley, and bigger companies, they have a lot of resources to do it, but it's harder because you have so many business processes in place. But ultimately, the payoff is much bigger. If you can turn a big company around that J curve, then the payoff is 100 times, 1,000 times bigger than it would be with a small company.
And what is it that maybe large companies, a company like Siemens with over 300,000 people across the world, what can we learn from those smaller speedboat startups from Silicon Valley?
Big companies and small companies each have some strengths and some advantages. The small companies start with a blank slate, and so they don't have any of the baggage. They can be born digital, born AI. They don't have a lot of workers that aren't trained in it, so they can immediately do it, and they can be very nimble. At the same time, they don't have the infrastructure. They don't have the supply networks. They don't have the customer networks, so it becomes much harder for them to scale up. The bigger company can very rapidly scale up once they make those business process changes, but they have to be flexible enough to be able to embrace it. And then they have to be smart enough to know how to reorganize their business processes, how to reinvent things. That takes a lot of managerial leadership. And not every company can do it. The reality is back when Siemens got started, most of the other companies that were started back in 1847, I don't think there's many companies left from Siemens competitors there. So most companies don't navigate through these transitions. But if you do it, then the payoff is enormous.
Very, very excited for that. We like to see us as like one of the oldest startups out there.
That's a great phrase, oldest startup. I like that.
Always reinventing. Yeah. So maybe to build on our earlier discussion as well, we are at midst of that massive transformation at Siemens. We have our North Star. We want to become one tech company.
Yes.
And that also means that we want to have a relentless customer focus and also foster better collaboration.
Great.
Across our business units, breaking down silos. And that's a big endeavor. So how do leaders effectively bring all these elements together? So leveraging data and AI, maintaining a deep understanding of customer needs, and building truly collaborative organizational behaviors to drive a cohesive and successful transformation across a company as vast and diverse as Siemens.
Well, it starts with leadership, and it starts with asking the right questions. And I'm glad that you laid out that North Star, that game plan there. The reality is that big, successful companies are designed to not change. They're designed to perpetuate a set of processes and practices that are generating value for customers, generating profits for stockholders, and they resist change. And that's actually the way they were meant to be. And so when a new technology comes along that requires change, there's a lot of inertia, and leaders have to push extra hard. It goes against the instincts of all the processes that have been set up that have, bureaucracy is, people see it as an enemy, but also it's what made the company so successful for so long. Now that there's a change that happens, you have to work doubly hard, not just to implement the new stuff, but also to overcome the old stuff. And that takes real courage, real management effort. And if you're smart, you're going to get buy-in from the people in the organization as well. They also have to see that this is a win for them, and then they help with the change. They add to the momentum. It can be done, but it's not easy.
So is there a secret to making these seemingly disparate initiatives blend into a unified winning strategy?
I don't think there's any one secret, but I think I'm a very data-driven person. I know the people at Siemens are as well. So
we love data.
Yeah, it helps a lot to be data-driven. And for instance, if you do the task-based approach where you break it down to these atomic units, you can see where the opportunities are. Instead of just sort of randomly trying things here and there, you're very disciplined about looking at, say, 18,000 tasks if you do the ONET taxonomy, or WorkHelix has a taxonomy of over 200,000 tasks. And you can evaluate each of them automatically. You don't have to do it by hand. The machines will automatically evaluate them. And now you have a roadmap, and you know where the value is. And everybody can see that. You can share it with everybody. You all get on the same page, and you see, what do you call it, one Siemens?
One tech company.
One tech company.
But we also say one Siemens. That's our hashtag now.
Okay, I love it. Because then everybody sees it, full transparency. This is the opportunity. These are the goals. And you don't try to do all of them at once. You prioritize how you roll them out, or have a set of them done in parallel. But data is your friend. Data is a tool that gets everybody on the same page and surfaces where the opportunities are.
So leveraging data.
Absolutely. No, and that's probably a big part of why Siemens has been so successful for so long, is that culture of being data-driven.
Yeah, and continuously reinventing ourselves, even though it's hard.
Yeah.
So is there, you've seen so many things, and I know you have a busy schedule every day. You're engaging with people all the time. You live here in the epicenter of innovation in Silicon Valley. If there was one piece of actionable advice that you could offer to our leaders sitting here with us in this room regarding their leadership and their leadership approach to AI, and the one tech company transformation in the next 12 months, 18 months, what would that be? What should be their absolute top priority on our journey to achieving our North Star?
Well, I think we're all blessed that we are in an era where we have just amazing technologies, and there's so many smart people and hundreds of billions of dollars going into advancing AI technologies. At the same time, the business results have been lagging behind, and our understanding of how to use them have not caught up. So that gap is where the big opportunities as well as the big challenges lie for the next 5 years or so. So my advice would be to focus on closing that gap by seeing that these technologies are amazing, but we need better economic understanding. That's what we do at the Digital Economy Lab. And we need a disciplined focus on using the technology to bring real business value, not just playing around with pushing new technologies. If we do that and close the gap, we're going to have the best 10 years we've ever had in history. If we don't do it, a lot of companies are going to fail, to be frank. But the thing to bear in mind is these technologies are a tool, and they allow us to change the world in ways we never could have before. We have more power to change the world than we ever have before. So we should embrace this power of these tools and think big, be ambitious about converting technology into productivity. And on the other side of it, there's going to be a new company, a new industry, a new set of customer value. And I think it's going to be a level of value creation unlike anything we've ever seen in history.
But so starting tomorrow, what is that one thing that every leader at Siemens should do?
Starting tomorrow, I think there's actually two things that everyone needs to do.
Even two?
Yes. So, but they both come from the same thing. One is identify the opportunities, And 2 is measure the results and see whether you're doing it. And I think the task-based approach is the way to do both of them. If you can identify the opportunities with this task-based approach, and then you can measure them using the credibility revolution applied to the tasks, then you're going to close the gap very efficiently. You can start tomorrow. There's a toolkit for doing this. And the companies that embrace that are going to be in that top 10% that's pulling away from most of the others.
I love that. We had a more philosophical edge to this conversation as well, and maybe to go back to that. I'm very curious about your take on this. So if humans need to accept that AI is now part of our world, do you think that AI also needs to accept that we humans are part of the equation?
That's interesting. I think that there's a real debate going as to whether or not AI should, have its own entity. And right now, I think AI, we should think of them as tools, but the time will come, and it's going to be interesting, where the atoms in a computer chip and the decisions and inferences that they're making will be comparable to the atoms in our brains. And unless you believe there's some kind of a ghost or a spirit in our brains, ultimately we are physical beings. And the machines are also physical beings. And I don't know if it'll happen in our lifetimes, but I think the time will come when we do interact with AI, and we're going to have to accept them, and they're going to have to accept us. And it's going to be a really weird, whole new phase of life and evolution. It would be interesting to live through that. And one of the things I hope we'll do is find ways to work it cooperatively. Some people are worried that there'll be a battle between humans and machines. But I think that ultimately they are our mind children, and they will be just as my children and my grandchildren, I hope, will respect me. I think that the AIs should also respect us humans.
And do you think now, also with the rise of AI, like in the past years and decades, technology has mostly changed our lives to the better in general? Do you think that now with agentic AI, this trend will continue, that there will be like a net positive effect?
There's no question AI has been mostly a net positive effect. Poverty has fallen, life expectancy has gone up. There have certainly been some negatives, climate change, obesity, and other things, although now with the new drugs, even that is being addressed a bit. What's going to happen in the future? Well, I think the key thing to bear in mind is that's a choice, not a prediction. So it's not us wondering what's going to happen to us. It's us deciding what we want to happen. And I think we always have to remember that we have agency as technology designers, as business leaders, as people in the workforce, as citizens. We each have choices that we can make to use the technology in different ways. As the technology becomes more powerful, we actually have more choices. We have more power going forward. If you have a spear or a shovel, you can do a little bit of a change in the world. If you have a jet, a bulldozer, atomic bomb, you can do a lot more impact on the world. And AI is more powerful than any other technology we've had before. So we have more potential to create a much better world or to create a much worse world. And the one thing I want everyone to bear in mind is that we shouldn't be passive and think, oh, what's going to happen to us? We should be active and think, how can we work to make the world better? What values do we care about? Do we want to create widely shared prosperity? Do we want to create more health, better environment? If so, let's think about actively how we can use the technology to do those things. And I don't have any doubt that if we make the right decisions in those directions, the world will be a lot better.
Erik, thanks so much for your time. I think this was a perfect closing to our conversation. It's been so exciting. Like, there are more and more questions popping into my head, but I hope we can continue this conversation at some point. I would
love that. Yeah, absolutely. Just we can certainly continue it, and but I'm glad that we had a chance to talk. You had some great questions. I enjoyed that very much, and it's exciting to see how Siemens helps lead us all into a new age.
Thank you. And to the audience out there, stay tuned, follow Erik, and we'll make sure to stay connected.
Terrific.
Thank you so much.
Well, thanks very much.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure.